Well, I'm Jason Craddock. If you don't know who I am the college minister here. And I got a phone call from Bradley as a text message last night. And he was asking if I had a sermon in the bank because he was sick. I told him that I do not keep sermons in the bank, only hold cold hard cash. But I said, if I can use something that I have previously done and repackage that a little bit, then we are good to go. If not, then we may have to talk some more. But here I am, and we hope that Bradley will feel better soon. My family, the Crad 5, as we call ourselves sometimes, not like a superhero group, but we spent this past Thanksgiving, or Thanksmas as we call it, in my parents' home on the eastern side of Memphis. Now this Thanksmas is our traditional extended Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's celebration that happens on my side of the family every other year, so that we can spend the other side with the other side of the family. And it's during these few days that I encountered something that I have absolutely avoided for much more than a decade now. It wasn't fishing. After one of our family meals of that week, everyone ate more quickly than usual. They picked up most of the kitchen quickly, and they moved into the living room of my parents' house, and the seats were fought over by our children as though the music had stopped in a game of musical chairs. Only to be told, of course, sit on the floor because the adults have to have the couches, which is what every house has to have, right? Because we don't want the grandparents sitting on the hardwood floor. Well, it was at this time that I was subjected to, for the first time, Dancing with the Stars. Now, this show has never interested me in the slightest, but for some reason it took hold of my household this year, and I stayed away. But when we were all together at my parents' house, there was no getting away from it. Now, for those of you who don't know Dancing with the Stars, they have stars, and I put that in quotes, because these are not stars in the traditional sense of what most people would consider stars. It's more star adjacent. They were siblings of stars. They were children of stars. A couple of athletes, a singer or two, a couple of once minor celebrities, and a handful of something that I like to refer to as new money celebrities, influencers. Now, how would you describe influencers to a time traveler from the 60s? Okay, so imagine if, instead of just movie stars and athletes, singers, TV hosts, news reporters that shape our thinking and help tell us what to buy, these ordinary people could become kind of mini Johnny Carsons or Walter Cronkites from their own living rooms, broadcast to these thin, tiny, battery-powered screens that people can hold in their hands and carry in their pockets, no bigger than a pocketbook. And they can access anything imaginable through information that is invisible, that's just in the ether, just like the radio or TV broadcasts. And these influencers, their main job is not acting or reporting news, or even performing some sort of athletic feat. It is just being watched. In fact, it's all about being watched, or what they call views. How many views can you get? And for some reason, people follow their daily lives and care about these opinions and copy their clothes and align with their politics or shaped by their words. And like Dick Van Dyke, remember this is for a time traveler from the 60s, or Doris Day, companies pay these people to casually recommend their products to their millions of viewers or followers. I do not like the term influencer. It makes me roll my eyes every time I hear it. And it's not even something I can control. They just roll back in my head when I hear this. But while I hate the word influencer, it is essentially what Jesus has called all of us to become and the kind of lifestyle that we're called to embrace, just maybe not the same way. And so our passage today comes from Matthew 5. If we would all please stand for the reading of God's word together this morning. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And then he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be consoled or comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. You are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt should lose its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world, a city situated on a hill that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather puts it on a lampstand. It gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven." The word of the Lord. The difference there, of course, is that they may see your good works. They may see all that you do, not for your glory, but for the glory of God. I don't know how many of you may have seen this word as we came across this, but you may not be familiar with it. This word, salt. Anybody familiar with salt? Okay, a few of us. When I say salt, I'm not talking about this chemical category of salt, of which I no longer have any knowledge of. When I say salt, and when Jesus said salt, and when people heard salt, they heard something simple, just the evaporated material or from evaporated salt water that they would have, this mineral. And that's what Jesus says that we are. You are the salt of the earth. That seems strange, really, in the context of the beginning of this public ministry of Jesus, his first sermon. I mean, it goes Beatitudes, and then straight to you are the salt. But placement is important because these are connected. These Beatitudes are the foundational kingdom values. And it's supposed to give off a Ten Commandments kind of vibe as Jesus teaches from the hilltop, surrounded by crowds of people. And here Jesus does not tell his disciples or the crowds that they are blessed when they are rich and powerful, but that they are blessed when they are poor and humble. They're not blessed when they are unjust or unfair, but when their deepest, most basic desire is for wrongs to be righted and for oppression to be lifted. They're not blessed when their lives are filled with immorality, rage, dishonesty, but when their hearts are pure. Because that's when we see God's own heart. They're not blessed when they are constantly agitating others, always seeking conflict, but are instead blessed when they are known for lives that are characterized by bringing peace. And this living of a blessed life under the influence of Jesus will in fact be contrary to the ways that much or most of the world will live it. And you will be ridiculed for it. And they will persecute you because of being like Jesus. But this is what you and I and everybody who has ever followed are called to. He sets it out all from his very first message. And he says, "Then you are the salt of the earth." This is not a separate message. This is the point. We understand the following part about being a light for the world that shines in darkness. We see this and it makes sense. We see flashlights and really understand this. They had lamps that were not nearly as bright as what they could have expected to light up bright spaces back in antiquity. But this salt of the earth, what does that really mean? It needs a closer look. What does Jesus mean? The first thing that most people think about when they think about salt, your minds go straight to where most of us keep it. It's in a kitchen pantry or on a table. It's around food. So maybe it's about seasoning that Jesus is talking to and how we may traditionally think about this salt. You may not realize this, but salt is a kitchen staple. It's necessary. It makes bitter food taste sweet. And it makes sweet things, make them even sweeter. Put salt in cookies for this reason. Salt comes from the Latin word salus, which is preserved more closely in Spanish, Latin-based languages, as sal. So if you see this word sal in something, it's more than likely going to come from something with salt. And you might actually be surprised to see this in other menu items that you're familiar with. Did you know that the word salad or salads were named for the Roman practices of soaking their lettuce leaves in salted water? In fact, in Spanish, it's called ensalada, in the salty stuff. Sauce and salsa also come from the use of salt. In this context, maybe Jesus is calling his followers to complement or enhance the flavor of the gospel message. Too much makes it unpalatable, and too little makes it bland. But just the right amount makes it a sweet taste in anyone's mouth. That has to be what Jesus was talking about. But, salt is also important in other ways. Salt is important for life. We have doctors in the room, neurologists, neurosurgeons. The body literally cannot function without this material, this salt. The brain relies on salt ions to transmit nerve impulses to the rest of the body, to the muscles. The muscles rely on it for contracting and for relaxing, and it's needed to maintain a good balance within the body. This works for animals too. They instinctively have craved salt, and they sought out paths and trails to bodies of water or salt deposits. These trails became roads and paths and led other humans to sources of water to hunt for and for our own salt stores and water supplies. So perhaps it's this bodily need for salt. That's what Jesus was speaking about. But, people may not have known all of that. Maybe it's about another issue that they had in antiquity. Maybe it's about preservation. You kids may not know, but mankind has not always enjoyed refrigeration and freezers. People who lived in icy climates could enjoy their food cold, but not most of the world. For thousands of years, the rest of the world has used salt to preserve different kinds of meats. And from what I understand, it works by absorbing moisture that bacteria could use to survive, and thus it kills the bacteria that spoils the meat. And that's why there are salted meats to begin with, often called cured, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Meats like sausage, you hear the word sauce right there? Sausage, or in Spanish it's salchicha, or salami. Ham and bacon too. Fish are still stuffed with salt to preserve them once they're caught. Egyptians first discovered this process of preservation, and they used it to mummify their deceased royalty so that they could pass into the afterlife. Well, in an ancient context without refrigeration, maybe Jesus meant this, that we should be the salt of the earth in a preservative metaphor, meaning the message of the cross will not decay in our hands, but would be preserved by those of us who would pass it on to every chance we get. Maybe it was that he was talking about. Yeah, surely Jesus meant it that way, unless he meant it in an agricultural context, because he does use a lot of agricultural parables. Salt has been used for hundreds of years as fertilizer and to help make manure better. It's used for soil enrichment. And today, salt is still a key ingredient, not the table salt necessarily, key ingredient in fertilizer, as long as it's not too much. And for this agrarian society, maybe that is what Jesus meant. He was always telling parables about agriculture, even telling the parable of the soils and how most of those soils were lacking in the story, and that the gospel couldn't take root because of it. Maybe part of us preparing the way for the gospel was us preparing the soil as the salt of the earth. That makes evangelistic sense. Maybe that's what Jesus meant, unless he was talking about it from a textile background. Back in the old days, they would use, and I guess still to this day, salt has been around for thousands of years, and it's been used in the use of fabric dye. It's a way to get the dye to go deep down into the fabric. It really does help push it in so that when you're a kid with a homemade ninja costume, it doesn't come out gray and it comes out gray instead of black. You want it to be black instead. This is what happened for me, and I'm still fixated on apparently 10 years later. 40 years later. And perhaps that was the idea, that we are the salt that really helps to push Jesus' teachings further into the fabric of people's lives. And there's kind of a preaching quality to that one too. Maybe that's it. Oh, but it's also used as a deodorizer. You can imagine what it was like before deodorant was around. And you sprinkled it on clothing that smells, or on shoes or sandals. Fishermen would take it and put some citrus on there maybe to help with the salt, take away the smell. Sin kind of smells. Maybe Jesus meant for it to be kind of talking about taking away the odors of the world and to bring the aroma of Christ out. That's kind of preachy and prophetic, a nice little object lesson too. But it could be a weed killer also. You think about this. We talked about fertilizer as soil enhancement, but salt can be used to kill weeds. And if you look at your chemicals nowadays, and even ancient kind of terrorism in some ways, when they would go and ruin crops with salt, you can kill weeds in your beautiful yard. Keep these concentrated salts and these liquids and spray them on there. You can kill the roots. You can even kill roots inside of a pipe, a drain pipe, as weeds are getting inside and they find a crack to get in there. You put this salt mixture inside of your toilet and you flush it and you let it sit for a while, and then it'll help kill the roots that are inside of your drains. But you better follow the instructions on this one. I want you telling people that Jason corroded your pipes. Well, they do sell this stuff. So maybe we're called to be more pastoral and help people get rid of the weeds that are choking out the seed of the gospel message. It kind of goes along with the other one. Or maybe it's about health and wellness. I also heard that salt has great medicinal and antiseptic qualities and did in the ancient world, killing germs and whatnot. They didn't have the ability to get rid of germs or even know what they were back then, but salt helped and was able to kill germs by dehydrating them, preventing infection. The word salt, or the Latin salus, even comes from Salus, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was the Roman goddess of healing. The word salve, if you think about the word salve, is ointment, or salud in Spanish, which means health. Or even salvation come from the same root word. So maybe we are the salt of the earth in that we can bring healing from our spiritual sickness through the good news of Jesus. Maybe that's what Jesus had in mind. But salt was also a valuable commodity back then. Maybe it was about being needed. In our modern times, we can quite simply drive to the store, pick up a package of salt for pretty cheap price, a big bag of it for salting driveways or for a restaurant. In most of the human history, it wasn't so convenient. Some people would trade in salt. They would cut off salt supplies for people during wars. The Romans developed these salt roads, they called them, such as the Via Salaria, that were made to transport salt to port cities and to communities for trade. Roman soldiers were even paid, in part, in blocks of salt or with money to purchase. You might recognize this from their salary that you even get nowadays. As the salt of the earth, we have to be indispensable commodity to the world. Maybe that's what Jesus meant. Or was it the preservative? Or was it the deodorizer? Or was it the ointment? Or the seasoning? Or the fertilizer? There's just too many options. What did Jesus mean? And maybe that's the idea. I've heard so many sermons about this passage over my life, and they've all seemed to have the answer to what Jesus meant. I think we've spent too much time trying to figure out what Jesus meant by "you are the salt of the earth" than the much more concerning part of if it loses its saltiness. How can salt lose its saltiness? And what does that even mean? Chemists might say that salt is one of the most stable compounds. If you look at the back of a container of salt, guess what the expiration date says on it? There isn't one. Pure salt doesn't expire. Now, when Jesus says when it loses its saltiness, it was supposed to cause some confusion. You can't run out of ways to use salt. It's the wonder mineral with what Morton has on their website, the great maker of salt, or miner of salt, or collector of salt, whatever we would say for that. They would say that this has more than 14,000 uses and counting. It's always useful for something. It raises boiling points. It lowers freezing points. It can actually be explosive when it's dropped into water. It's a necessary chemical in baking. Salt changes everything it is added to. So when Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth," maybe he means that there are so many ways that we can be used to influence this world. And while you can push any metaphor to its breaking point, Jesus didn't really clarify where he was going with this. But it's not about seasoning. It's not about preservation. It's not about soil preparation or health and wellness or fabric dye. It's not about any of those things, and yet it's about all of those things. We are called to be people of influence by simply living our lives with genuine faith. Living our lives like Jesus. And it's counterintuitive. We don't believe it. That can't be enough. Can it? Just like salt, we can bring change to any system simply by living faithfully a life after Jesus and letting the gospel within us preach by the way that we are. And with so many ways to live out this life of influence, this has to be what Jesus meant. It's about having a nearly infinite number of ways to influence the world in which we are called to live in, and choosing one at any given moment to make a difference for the kingdom of heaven, to make a difference by being like Jesus. Chris Southward where's Chris? He's right here in front of me. I can't see apparently. He passed out these stickers. I don't know if you still have these stickers you passed out. You just bought a certain number of them. He has them on the back of his car. Always know when it's Chris's truck. It says simply on the back, "Love like Jesus." If every single Christian in this world loved like Jesus, it would be a different place. But here's the sobering part. If with all of these options, with these nearly infinite number of options of ways that we can be influential, if we still can't seem to find a way to be influential in a positive way, then maybe we just aren't salt after all. And that's the scary part. Where is your life of influence? How do you make a difference in the world that you live in, with the people that you connect with, people that you encounter every single day? Do we have the values of Jesus in our life, or do we try to do it in a different way? Because Jesus says simply, "Be like me and change the world." He says, "You are the light of the world after this." Well, Jesus, I thought you were the light of the world. Yes, they are both right. Because when we're being like Jesus, then we are his light. We are him in the world, shining brightly for all to see. May this be our pattern and our focus this upcoming year. If you have anything, any needs, any prayers, I will be where Bradley is normally standing or sitting right over here. If you need to prayers, we'll step into the stairwell area, entryway area right here to the side, if you like, while we sing this next song. And if you don't, I'll be praying for you anyway, collectively. Let's stand and sing together.